But it seems to be working.
Yep.
All right, welcome back to the show, guys. Welcome back to the Iron House Podcast. It's your boy Daryl,
And this is Roy.
and today we wanted to have a quick little conversation about autoregulation. Roy brought up that it's an interesting topic to talk about, and a lot of people don't know exactly what it is and how it works in the resistance training. And we want to talk about what it is, how it works, what are some of the benefits of it, and how you can go about using autoregulation in your own training. Right?
Yep, that's pretty much it.
So kick it off, man. Tell the good people at home what autoregulation is exactly.
Well, what it basically boils down to is autoregulation is adjusting your training based on how you perform or how you feel for that day.
Yeah.
So you push a bit more on the days you feel good, and you push a bit less on the days you feel a bit less good.
Yeah, relative to other training days.
Yeah.
And other performance output days.
Yeah.
So it's a fancy word for just adjusting your training based on how you feel.
And it's funny because or people that have a lot of training experience kind of do this automatically.
Yeah.
But I still see quite a few people who have a really hard time with this. Because pretty often I hear people about, they'll ask me if they can up the weight when I have like an RPE range in there. And I'll always say as long as you stick to the range, I don't care.
Yeah.
As long as you're within the range, you're on program.
Yeah.
I don't care if you go up 20 kilos on the target weight. If it's within RP range, you're good.
If it's to the prescribed estimated amount of work you're supposed to do that day, then it might be that day you feel stronger. So you have to go a little bit heavier to make sure you're training at the right level.
Yeah.
And I get that question often as well. Almost never, if they can go lighter, that my athletes just always feel good and they want to usually go heavier. And that's also autoregulation. Make sure you don't go too hard, or when you have a day we're gonna get into that. But basically, what in the most cases it is that people's having a hard day, or they forget that there's stressors and life factors outside the gym that might affect how you're going to perform on that day. And autoregulation is a good way to give yourself a bit of an obvious trigger to be like, okay, I don't have to stick to these weights. I don't have to go do something I'm not ready for.
It helps you accept some of the chaos that comes with training.
Exactly.
Because, we're not machines. We can't just go up 5 kilos every week until infinity. That'd
be nice.
That'd be nice.
That'd be really nice.
That works for like 3 months. And then
exactly. In the beginning, when you're a noob, then you can do that.
Then you can do that.
But so what happens usually is that autoregulation has to do with not only your physical readiness and how recovered you feel from the previous workout, how strong you feel for that day, able to put your work in when you're building up. It also has to do with a little bit of mental readiness. I mean, if physically you're fine, but you've had a really stressful day or you had a really high emotional day, that can also affect your training.
Yeah, that can definitely affect performance.
Absolutely. And the risk of not listening to these signals and just training through it is that you might not be training at the same technique that you're used to because you're unable to feel your positioning, feel your technique as you normally should, which can cause injuries, or you're going to be tackling heavier loads than you should be on the day, which could also affect how well you're able to recover afterwards. And you might not be recovered enough from the previous workout, and you're going to go make the fatigue even worse now also.
Yeah, because that's what I've had a couple times with athletes where they really want to stick to the numbers, and then they can do a 3x4 at the prescribed weight. Because it's just like a set of 4 would turn into RP11. So then they start doing doubles to still get the prescribed volume. And it's no, it's okay if you just drop the weight. You don't have to go to RP 9.5 for 4 sets.
But there's a lot of different ways to auto-regulate. So that's one of the options. Let's talk about some of the different ways you can do it, because you're talking about RPE.
Yeah.
And RPE is, that's how we work. That's how...
That's the most used way to auto-regulate, because RP is inherently auto-regulatory, because one day in RP 8 might be 100 kilos and one day might be 110. Another day it might be 90.
Yeah, the same weight could be very different RPEs depending on the day.
Yeah.
So tell the people what exactly RPE is.
RPE stands for rating of perceived exertion, not rate of perceived exertion. It's rating.
Yeah, it's because
you're
rating the exercise.
Yeah.
Rate is something. It's technically a completely different word.
Yeah. I only learned this from Eric Helms, who's very smart. So look him up, by the way. And it's basically a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 of how much, not effort, but exertion you put into something.
Yeah, and so the P is very important for me. Is the perceived.
Yeah.
You have to make a gut check in that moment to have an estimate. Okay, how do I feel I'm doing? So it's perception. You have to be aware of yourself in a situation to be able to make a good rating.
Yeah, because we can try and be pretty decently objective with RPE, but it is inherently, it'll always stay subjective, you know? Like, everybody can tell you that it looks like a 6, but if you feel like it's an 8, then it's an 8. That's how it works. Yeah. But how it's most commonly used is also as a reverse reps in reserve scale. So RP8 is 2 reps in reserve, RP9 will be 1 rep in reserve, RP10 is, no reps left in the tank.
Yeah.
So on and so forth.
Yeah, so it's when you're rating your sets, you're basically trying to determine how much work are you still able to do, how much do you have left in the tank. So like Roy said, if you're training at RP8, or that's a prescribed training, you're trying to train at a weight where you can only accomplish 2 more reps after that in that set.
Yeah.
So that's basically how it goes. So the idea is to be able to, especially when you're coached, for the coach to have a line of effort output and total workload to train you on, so that you don't go over, you don't stay under, you're not underperforming, and certain RPEs are good for certain things. You're not going to have a lot of situations where you're training technique at RPE 9. That's more force training and power training. You're also not going to you're not going to really get much experience for the platform if you're always training at RPE 6. So they serve multiple purposes.
Yeah. There's a time and place for easy work and hard work.
Exactly. You got to make sure you train smart and train hard.
Yep.
And we use RPE here in the gym as well for our clients.
Yeah.
Almost all athletes, even when custom programs, we give people RPE because it's just a lot of people in the beginning, they don't know how strong they are. So you can't prescribe everything based on percentages. Yeah. Also, the divide between the kind of work someone can do in different percentages is not the same for everyone. So some people can do a certain amount of reps at 80%, but there's no not everyone has a linear, obvious line of reps relative to percentage of 1 rep max that they can do.
Yeah, that can really differ per person. A good example, for instance, is Julius, who only comes here on the weekends for sessions. And he used to be, or he's still rowing competitively. Like he's pretty much an endurance athlete. Like, and now it's gotten better as we've been training for like a year. He's starting to slowly turn into like a real powerlifter, Yeah. But before, like you'd give him an AMRAP, you'd give him an AMRAP at like 85%, which should be like a 5 rep max for most people.
Yeah, and a 5 rep max at RPE 9.5.
Yeah, and he'll do like 12 reps.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so it's crazy. So, exactly. That's why RPE can be so handy, because you're not basing it on an assumed percentage. You're telling someone, work as hard as you can until you can only do 2 more reps, and that's where I want you to stop. I want you to have 2 reps left in the tank, so that we're not overdoing it, we're not going over that threshold. Or it's also a good way to help someone estimate their 1 rep max if you're starting with a new athlete, or if you are a beginner. If you're lifting and you're doing a set with a certain weight and you feel, okay, I think I have a good idea that I can do 4 more. What I like about RP also is that if you do it right and you actually get close to RPE 10 from time to time, or when you're maxing, or if you're in a competition, that you actually have a clear reference point of what RPE 10 really is. Because there are a lot of people who write down RPE like 9, but you look at it, and as experienced coach, you're like, you can probably do 3 more if you did it right. So,
but I feel like that happens more on like accessory lifts than actual barbell lifts.
I've had athletes that they would send me videos of their squat, and it would be maybe like 94% of their 1 rep max. Like, yeah, that was RP 9. Like, I'm not sure it was. And then we train together, and then we go, okay, let's start with 1, and if it feels good, we'll go for a double, and then end up doing triples and 4 reps. So it's like, well, so sometimes you need that reference point to know exactly what RPE 10 is. If you have a hard time being honest with yourself about it. And like RPE is one of the ways. You mentioned reps in reserve also. Yeah. That's basically the same thing. You're trying to estimate how much work you have left in the tank. You're trying to stay below a certain threshold for whatever prescribed reason the coach or the programming has. Usually it's because you need time to adapt things. You don't want to speed through your training. You don't want to miss out on opportunities to learn technique also. So you have normal programming that will keep you on a certain RPE for a few weeks until the RPE really drops, or the person has to, like you say, have to adjust the weight back up to keep. Yeah,
because I think that's also where RPE can come in handy, is what, like with progression, because how much stronger people get week to week also differs a lot. Yep. Like you can make a program for like 5-6 weeks and have it up the program by, I don't know, so let's say 5 kilos every week. But, somebody might become stronger than that per week, but another person might become less strong week to week. So like if the deviation is too much, then you end up like training too hard or way too easy, and that's where RP comes in handy. Like it's supposed to be this way, but that's way too hard. So let me just drop down so I can get some good training in.
Yeah, I see it as just a really easy way to stick to the plan. That you have a target that you're trying to hit, and you can adjust based on that target. And I think people could probably benefit from learning to let weights go, certain weights on the barbell. I mean, people even have that I need to do 97.5, but 2 plates of 20 per side is easier, stuff like that. So like there's a bit of like a numberphilia with most lifters, but RP is a really good way to stay on target and not worry about the weights and make sure you're training on plan and towards a specific goal instead of just training for that specific rep. There's a lot of things that influence, of course, how you train on a day. And there's so many things that can influence it that it's so hard for a coach to just be like, oh, well, this week we're going 2.5 kilos heavier. When I see training programs with no RPE or reps in reserve or level of intensity, anything, I always get really worried because it gets heavier and heavier, but there's no way to take into account all the different things in life that can affect your training.
Yeah. Yeah, like what I said earlier, like embracing the chaos that comes within training. Because even if you like to do nothing but just train, eat, and sleep, you're still going to have like better days and worse days. It's just inherently how it works.
Yeah. So there's actually a really long list of things that can affect your training. And most people might not even able to recognize everything or have no idea that might affect how I feel on the workout. Because it's normal and we all accept the premise that training is like this. Training goes up and down. Some days have good and bad. So that's inherent. There are things you can do to optimize your training so that it becomes as linear as possible. So the dips and the hills get closer to each other. And the more serious you take your training, the more you can do that, of course. But there's a lot of things that influence it. So just to make a bit of a short list, like work stress, the time of training. If you always work out in the evening, also you got to work out in the morning. That might make a big difference for you. And people, I mean, sometimes you have people who religiously only train after work, after 5 or 6 o'clock, and you got to go compete. And they're in the first group in the morning, and that might be
that can feel really weird.
That could be a bit of almost like a culture shock. So when you train has influence your emotional state for women being on your period or anything resembling that. Poor recovery from the previous training session. Yeah. Use of like alcohol or substances the weekend before, and you got to start training on Monday. What else?
Well, there's also a couple things that like also affect performance, but like in a positive way, because stuff like caffeine, will improve your performance.
Yep, absolutely.
So if you take caffeine, you can probably lift the same weight at lower RP or more weight at the same RP.
Yep.
Also stuff like arousal or like hype.
Yeah.
If you get really hyped for a lift, you can probably lift more or lift the same weight easier than if you're just going into it like you're brushing your teeth.
Yeah, I think most people can recognize, like, if you have a really fun session with your friends and you're kind of egging each other on, you're probably going to push more weight where you would, on yourself, you would ride it up as a higher RP than normal. Yeah. So those, indeed, there are, same as there are negative effects for training, there are also positive effects when it comes to that. I'm trying to think of if there's anything that really affects, like, my training. I just
but your training is so random that it's all chaos.
Yeah, but I just try to go as hard as possible. So I'm always trying to get to RPE 10.
Yeah.
But in that case, for me, it's a matter of if I'm having a tougher day, I'll still go to RPE 10, how I train. I don't power lift, so people are like, wait, he goes to RPE 10, that's weird.
Yeah, but so I think the reason why that works is because you don't stick to one workout. Like, you do so many different things. Yeah. And then you can like train pretty hard all the time because you do so many different things. You're not gonna run into overuse injuries. No. Whereas like if you do the same exercises week to week and you go RP 10 every week, you're gonna probably get injured, burn yourself out, and all kinds of other nasty stuff.
Because when I was deadlifting regularly in my programming, even though it wasn't like strict powerlifting, I had a rule: I have to deadlift 260 every week, at least once a week. Mm-hmm. So that was just one single, no matter what I'm doing. Even if this is my only workout, I do one single because that was for me RPE 9, and I did it for like a few months, just every week, at least one rep, like 260, just to pull it. And at some point, you do notice that, hey, this is starting to feel like not RPE 9 anymore.
Yeah,
but then like 262.5 was like RPE 14. So it didn't have the effect I was hoping for, but I was probably missing the rest of the training components to actually make it make sense.
Yeah, probably. Were you only doing the single or also like other sets? Or was it just like work up the single and then go do other stuff?
Yeah, that was it. I don't know why. It was just like the plates on the bar was just nice and like I could always pull it.
Yeah, but I think that can work out pretty well because, you know, like you're training hard, but you're only actually doing a single set.
Yeah.
So you're not really doing that much work.
Yeah. Speaking of which, that's also another way to use autoregulation is the idea of if what's prescribed is 4 sets of 6 and you're having a tough day, making it 6 sets of 4.
Yeah.
There's also an option.
Yeah, or also just, you know, skipping a set, which I sometimes do. Especially if I'm like peaking towards a meet where, you know, like the volume you do doesn't really matter that much. As long as you like don't start skipping too many sets too soon. But if you're like in the last couple of weeks, you're pretty tired, you're beat up. And then if it's like, you know, if I'm feeling really beat up, like I can't get the next set anymore at like a reasonable RP, I'll usually just skip the set instead of dropping down. Because what I sometimes have is where you drop down and then in your head, it should feel easier.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't.
And then it doesn't.
Then
so then you just have like another shitty set. So like, let me skip this. But at that point, like intensity is the thing that's the most important. So, you know, it's totally okay. And I'm talking like the last 2 weeks before heading into a tabor.
Yeah, because at that point, you're just being hyper-specific for the competition. So at a competition, no one cares how good you can do your triples.
Yeah, whether I did like a 3x5 or a 4x5 doesn't matter that much at that point anymore.
No. And of course, maybe people who aren't super competitive powerlifters or not diehard powerlifters, I would assume most people won't feel the need to auto-regulate because maybe they train more like I do.
Yeah.
Like with me, I try to go as hard as possible. I'm really trying to suffer. But most people, when they train, I think they experience enough recovery in between to not feel as though they have to auto-regulate. You don't hit that wall in the training at some point where you come in with expectations. You're like, oh, today I'm going to do this weight for this many reps, and then all of a sudden the body crashes.
True, but so because those people they get more recovery, but if they're not serious like athletes, they're probably also not as strict outside of the gym as they are as like serious powerlifters, that kind of stuff. So they might have like a bigger difference between the good workouts and the bad workouts. And I think where auto-regulation can really come in handy is turning a bad workout into a still productive workout.
Yeah,
because I've seen that like a lot where people can hit the target weight and then they feel like it's a bad workout. Where if you just like do a bit less work, do a bit less weight, do less sets, whatever you need to adjust, you can still feel like you did a good workout because it was a productive workout, which is all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would kind of want to try and do is give people maybe like a little cheat sheet to know when it might be a signal for auto-regulation. Because serious athletes, especially someone who's coached and has a program, the program is like almost, you know, it's holy. They want to follow it to the T.
Yeah.
So let's talk about maybe some of the things that people can recognize. Be like, okay, this is an example of maybe I need to tone it down, or maybe I'm coming into the gym with this. It might affect how I'm training. I'm a big proponent of train first with your best attempt and your best mindset and see what the results are. You definitely don't want to lie to yourself. You don't want to be feeling like shit and just try to be super optimistic and still lift. Being honest is important, but I think before we get into it, people should still, if you're having a bad day, if you don't feel up to it, try first and still make sure you're doing everything right. If you have cues from your coach, if you have a certain setup and technique or flow that you need to get into, do those things physically, even though mentally or emotionally you might be feeling like shit. And let the barbell speak first, you know? So don't just assume, man, I had a really bad day at the office today, I'm going to lift like shit. I've had moments where I've had really tough days, and then I went to deadlift, and I hit really, really close to my PRs, or my technique was on point.
Yeah, I think any strength athlete can confirm this, where like sometimes your what you're expecting to be your worst day are like your best days.
That should have a name. There should be a name for that phenomenon, because it happens so regularly. And even in competitions, people they come in, they weigh, and they just feel like crap, and like they also say that they're nervous and it's not going to be a good day. Let's open 5 kilos lighter on the opener and see what happens. And then all of a sudden everything just flies and you feel good. Yeah. So I wonder if that's just like getting yourself out of that dip, or is it like misperception of that dip?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. Because it's weird, because like I've legit had days where I don't just like feel bad mentally, but like I'm actually starting to get sick. So I'm also actually like feeling bad physically, you know. I still had like awesome training sessions.
Yeah.
Like it's so weird.
I remember
weird.
the first time I benched 160, which was to me like one of my biggest lifting goals. After that, I was like, fuck it, I'm done. That day that I benched 160, man, I had stomach flu and I had to put on my knee sleeves because when I put leg drive, my knees were hurting and shit. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to get this today. But for some reason, everything was flying. And granted, afterwards, I felt horrible. I felt beat up afterwards. I think I went to bed at 9 o'clock that night because of how shitty I felt from it. But it's just a weird thing. And I think for a lot of people, I think the ability to pull yourself out of a dip is pretty hard. I think it calls for like really strong mental faculties.
Yeah, it takes like a lot of mental effort.
Yeah,
for sure. I think that's why what you said earlier is let the barbell speak for itself. Because I'm also a big believer in that. Just try first, put in your best effort, and like if your best effort doesn't allow you to do what's prescribed in the program, then you can drop down.
Yeah,
because then probably performance isn't there. But also, what I also like is just monitor how your warm-ups are moving. Like really think about how they feel. And, because most people in here film their sets anyway, look at how fast they move.
Yeah. Before you get there, you got to do what most people don't do is take all your sets seriously. People
that for sure.
Yeah, they fuck around with an empty bar and they do whatever. Like when I see people warm up and I know how they lift, like, wait, that's not how you lift the bar out. That's not your setup. That's not where your normal bar position is.
That's true, yeah.
And then you don't have a good reference point because you're not actually warming up for your working sets. You're just fucking around and moving for the sake of moving. So the first step is to make sure that you're training properly. You're actually putting your best effort so that you can deduct whether you're having a bad day or not. So if you will have to auto-regulate.
Yeah, because if you take your warm-up seriously, then you'll end up like with a couple weights for each set where, okay, this weight is moving this way. So yeah, I should perform pretty well for this day.
Yeah. So like I was saying, I think for most people, like getting out of, like pulling yourself out of the dip, so it being an actual dip, either mentally, emotionally, physically, and then like climbing out of that dip to still have a good day, I think that's really hard. Yeah, so I think in most cases, it would have to be just a misperception of it. So the idea of like mislabeling what you've experienced. So just because everyone gets down because, I don't know, someone hit their car, doesn't mean that you also have to make it that big of a deal or let it affect you that much. So people like to label something, like make a really dramatic ultimate determination of this is how I feel or this happened, so I feel this way. And that's already how they come into the gym with that mindset. So they don't even give themselves a chance to train out of it or get into the flow and try it anyway. Like, oh, I had an argument with my boss, so I'm going to have a shitty day. Well, you don't have to. You can have experienced bad shit and just compartmentalize it. And gym is gym, training is training.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like that kind of stuff, like it affects you physically, which can affect performance, but it doesn't really affect you, or it affects you mentally, which can affect performance, I should say, but it doesn't affect you like physically.
Yeah,
I think I've heard the same thing with like sleep, where how good or bad you slept has zero effect on actual 1 rep max performance. Which, if you think about it, is pretty weird. Because
it is weird.
Yeah,
I'm trying to wrap my head around it. So one more time. So how, if you sleep good or bad, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really affect 1 RM performance physically. Because like it'll affect your recovery, which can affect your performance at the end of the day.
Okay, so what you're saying is it's not like your muscles can do less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, so if you like slept bad for like 1 day, but you recovered, then you're all good. Which like
true. Okay,
probably a lot of powerlifters can confirm. I've had it as well, where like you sleep awful the day before the competition, but you still perform really well. Because you're recovered anyway, and the sleep doesn't really affect your 1 RM strength, so then you perform well.
True. I think with those things, like when you grab the recovery and your training and auto-regulation and performance on a day, there's so many factors that play into it that you can always find an exception to the rule. Also, there could be 100 people who will say these 5 things cause me to have to auto-regulate, and you have one joker who's like, well, I experience all this stuff all the time and always have really great days. So there's a bunch of exceptions. I think what's important is to try to identify for yourself, just if every training you're having is an effective training.
Yeah.
Does the training feel as though it's a training that contributes to the goal? Are you training? Are you able to work towards what you want to work towards? For me, the biggest thing is if you're hitting the weights, but you're fucking sloppy and the technique is breaking down and you're doing weird shit and you can't recognize your own lifts because you're just trying to force the numbers, I think that's a pretty clear-cut sign.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you said, trying to have productive training days instead of good training days is pretty important.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you follow Supreme Strength Coaching. They had a good post about this, about training versus performing. Because sometimes we get
I think you reposted it in your stories, right?
I might have. I don't know. Maybe. I'm not sure.
Because it's not familiar. But walk us through it.
Anyway, so they were talking about, because sometimes we get so attached to the numbers where we start to try and perform in trainings, trying to hit certain numbers instead of just trying to produce a productive session, Like we really want to hit that 200 kilo squat instead of just going for 190, which would be like a productive set.
Yeah. So that's like the hitting numbers for the sake of hitting numbers and becoming really good at your craft. Because I think most people prefer lifting more weights than learning more about themselves as a lifter. Sometimes certain weights will teach you more about your technique and give you opportunity to learn more from reference than other things. Just having to overly brace and overly hype yourself can mask a lot of the lessons, a lot of the feelings of your movement because you're going too heavy. Sometimes going a little bit lighter and really feeling, okay, I'm definitely on depth. Oh, this is what I want my knees to do. This is my hip angle to my knee angle. This is where my bar position. Oh, if I do this with my grip, it feels a little bit better.
Because that way we get into the mindset of, training to become better instead of training to like hit some sort of number in the training session.
Yeah, because we ask that to people, like, you want to become a really good power lifter, or you want to become like really, really strong? Those are two different things.
Yeah, true. Those are different things.
So I guess the lesson is that you need to figure out for yourself, are the trainings, the workouts I'm doing, are they productive? Are they working for me? Am I working towards my goal? Or am I overly focused on a pre-described number or weight, regardless of what it actually means in the end?
Yeah.
And don't get too caught up in the weights. I mean, if your coach is a good coach and he gives you an RPE target or a range to train in, make sure, one, track your training properly. Make sure you actually write down your RPEs, write down your reps in reserve or your LOE to give an indication, okay, this set or this total workout felt like this. Be accurate. Try to be as accurate as you can. Use reference points from, this is a really good training day. This is what I would like to have repeated over multiple workouts. Use it as a reference point and build from there. You think, well, I did all the numbers, but it felt a lot more challenging this week. You're going to ask yourself, why is that? Is it because the training is harder, or have you had a harder week? And
and just trying these things can also help you develop the skill that is autoregulation. Because it definitely is a skill. I think I said this off camera, but most most athletes with a lot of experience like do this inherently. Yeah. Like ask anybody. Ask Frank, for example. He probably barely knows what RPE is, but he probably autoregulates. Yeah. Because it's just a skill you develop as an athlete.
Yeah, but also because at some point you understand, if I push it, there'll be consequences further down the road. Yeah. And I'd rather have a guaranteed good enough session tomorrow than a 4 session today with a high chance of a garbage session tomorrow.
Yeah.
So there's more workouts to come. There's more training to come, and it's absolutely a skill because people are inherently fucking bad at estimating things. Like humans in general, not just in training, are horrible at estimating things. Ask anyone statistically about a question, they'll be wrong, most likely. Like there's tests where they grab random questions and they give chimpanzees the options to choose, and chimpanzees always 1/3 of the time apparently they get it right. Most people get questions wrong more than chimpanzees do because we're just bad.
That's hilarious.
We're bad at estimating things. If you fill up a bucket with tennis balls, you ask someone how many balls are in there, almost no one will come close to the right answer because we're just bad at estimating. So you have to learn to perceive your training appropriately. If training out matters to you, if it's important to you, it's also worth taking into account all the things that can affect your training. Don't just ignore the fact that you had a hard week or you had a stressful deadline or something and then be like, man, I don't get it. My squats are going shit. Well, of course, yesterday you had a really, really tough emotional day. Your recovery is low. You didn't eat right. You might have pissed away a good training because you partied the whole weekend. Yeah. So be aware of the things in your life that will actually influence it. I'm not saying don't have fun and sacrifice everything for training, but don't come in Monday knowing you have to do really, really heavy sets and knowing you didn't sleep the whole weekend or you had a big emotional blowout and just try to force it.
Yeah, but I think speaking about that, it's also because for a lot of people, it's hard to accept those things as like legit reasons to drop down weight. Because like I don't think I've ever had a client where they were taking it too easy. At least like not a pretty serious training athlete, you know. Because I have some people who have a hard time coming to the gym, but for the people who don't have a hard time coming to the gym at all, I've never had anybody like take it too easy in training. It's usually where like they should probably take it a bit easier because they have like good reasons to take it a bit easier because they have this going on, that going on. They slept like shit, you know, they're tired, I don't know, whatever. But they don't because they gotta stick to the program.
Yeah. There's an example of someone also, I'm not going to say his or her name, but it's exactly the same thing. I have them on really, really heavy training. And then, yeah, if I say too much, this is going to be a bad story because if I say too much, I'm going to spoil who it is. But then they go through pretty serious shit the whole week. But then on the end of the week in the last heavy bench session, I'll get a message like, oh man, yeah, I don't know what happened. It was just stuff. I'm like, no shit. It was supposed to be challenging. It was supposed to be a tough one. That's why I wrote that in the program. Like, just try. Don't worry too much about the number. But then it's so easy for people to go overboard and kind of be tough on themselves if there's 100 good reasons why it didn't go right.
Yeah, a lot of times people are just too hard on themselves.
Yeah, you got to be if you're a performance athlete in any way, you kind of have to be kind to yourself because everyone accepts the premise you're going to have good days and bad days.
Yep.
But still, when a bad day comes every once in 5 weeks, you're all like, how can this happen? I don't understand it. But even though everyone understands the premise, you have good days and bad days. There's a coach that says it's the rule of thirds. So if you're working hard towards anything, so a third of the time, you're going to have a fantastic experience and performance. A third time, it's going to be moderate. It's going to be average. It's going to be comparable to your peers or around you. And a third time, you're going to feel like absolute shit. There's going to be things unexplicable. There's going to be an X factor somewhere that caused you to do it. And out of that 1/3 time, most of it is going to be non-explainable. There's not going to be a really clear-cut reason.
Probably.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to pinpoint, it's because of this and this plus that minus that times that I feel this way. And the reason is...
If only it were that easy. You know, our jobs would be a lot easier if it was that way.
But because most people also are just not open to perceiving what's going on.
Yeah.
They don't sit back and go, okay, what did I experience today? What are the things that might contribute positively, contribute negatively? It's also probably not a way to live. Sounds maybe a little bit too fucking methodical. But people don't do that. So you have to dig and ask questions, and then you uncover, so how was that? Oh, yeah, well, it was actually really tough. Oh, well, okay. And what else happened? Yeah, I got a call that my aunt is sick. Oh, okay. And then like, oh, wait, so yeah, I technically do have a good reason to not feel really fantastic today.
Yeah.
So be kind to yourself, man. Just, take it easy. You're supposed to have good days and bad days. If you have bad days, fucking relax. It's okay. We all have bad days.
Chill.
Yeah. And use autoregulation. I think if you're training with a coach and the coach also prescribes that, talk to your coach about it. Talk about in what situations would he rather have something else or something. I think most coaches would agree that if you're having a tough day, you're absolutely allowed to adjust the weights back down because we're trying to...
And don't be afraid that the coach is going to get mad at you because, trust me, it's probably going to be a lot kinder to you than you are to yourself.
Yeah, most likely. If you have a good coach, he's probably in your corner and trying to protect you from yourself. So, dope.
Yeah.
Give it a shot. And let us know what you guys think about autoregulation. Do you do it? Is it something that is part of your programming? Maybe you use it in other aspects of life, not just in training, which is also, autoregulation is a fancy word to use for this, but autoregulation can be done for almost everything. And let us know what you think. If you enjoyed this episode, give it a like, comment wherever you're listening or watching it if you can't comment. If you'd rather see us as you listen, we have a YouTube version of this as well. Subscribe, do all that good shit, do all the algorithm stuff.
Feed the algorithm.
Yeah, because I can't figure it out. Instagram has gone to shit. Nothing works. So just, even if you didn't enjoy it, just be a nice guy and be like, comments. Just leave us, press the space button so that it counts as a character and press send. That's good. Just empty comments. That's fine with me. Let the algorithm work for us. And hey, thanks for listening.
See ya.